Are you tired of a podcast that only entertains you without leaving you with something to think about? Are you looking for a podcast that truly enrich your life? Then Let's Talk is the show for you. Our motto is to make people think after every episode, and we take that mission seriously. Each episode is carefully crafted to provide an insight and ideas to help you live a more fulfilling life. From practical tips for improving your mental and physical health to thought provoking ideas and discussions on personal growth and development, Let's Talk has something for everyone. Our guests come from a variety of backgrounds and bring wealth of knowledge and experience to the table. We believe that everyone has something to teach, and we are committed to bringing you the best insights, ideas from the wide range of perspective. So if you're ready to start thinking more deeply about your life, how you can make it better, then Let's Talk is the podcast for you. Subscribe today and start enriching your life one thought-provoking episode at a time. Welcome to Let's Talk podcast. Hello and welcome to Let's Talk podcast, a podcast enriching lives. This is the whole motto of our endeavor when we get started is how to make people think through different topics to different areas, bringing experts together. If you're wondering that I have a different setup, you're right. I recently relocated along with my family to Orlando. And this is also a special episode because this is the first time we are recording. I'm still in the midst of preparing and creating a good studio look, specifically around black and white, which is our overall structure and the color coordination from the podcast perspective. So I really appreciate if you have any feedback around that, and we will definitely try our best to incorporate. That being said, let me give you a quick perspective about clinical trials. Clinical trials is one of the major, I would say, part of our drug development process. And let me give you one story around that. And this story is about a new treatment for lung cancer. Lung cancer is one of the leading causes of death worldwide, and we have seen so much across different countries about this lung cancer and related issues around. Before 2000, there were challenges around different surgeries, radiations, after effects, and all. So in early 2000s, a group of researchers in the United States conducted a clinical trial, which is called gefitinib. I'm sorry if I'm unable to pronounce it rightly, which was targeted specifically around the genetic mutation in the lung cancer cells. They enrolled hundreds of patients across the board who already have kind of failed to respond to their previous treatments. The results were truly astounding, remarkable, I would say. The significant number of patients who received this particular drug experienced a significant reduction in their tumors, and some even saw complete remission of their cancer. Based on this particular positive results, it was approved by FDA for the advanced lung cancer in 2003, and then eventually become a standard treatment across the board. So as you can see that there are some positive effect on clinical trials. It's not like everything is positive. There may be some negative as well. And that is the reason we are having a discussion with a gentleman here who has some experience about and studied along about the clinical trials, about the health and life sciences, and overall in terms of the experience in the leadership, in P&L management, in mergers and acquisitions of more than 3 decades of the experience throughout. So that being said, I would try to welcome Shri to this podcast and to the episode. Shri, thank you so much for providing some time to discuss about this important topic of clinical trials and the topics around it.
Thank you, Saurabh. Pleasure to be here. Appreciate it.
Thanks. So, Ashri, you have such a long, I would say, more than 3 decades of experience in terms of researching of how health and life industry has transformed over the era. So, how exactly, if you can help our audience to understand, how exactly you get into this particular sector, and is it something you were really interested in medicines in terms of how to develop the industry? You have seen the challenges and any kind of perspective you would like to give us here.
No, thank you. Health and wellness is a very important part of everybody's life, including one's own. My journey did not get into healthcare and life sciences straight away. I'm an engineer by background, and engineering taught me basically how do you learn new things. My early part, I actually graduated from a school in Pilani, and then made my way to being in Oslo, Norway, where I continue to work in technology, different type of technologies globally. I came to do my master's in US, and again, it was in electrical engineering, computer science. And then I started to become in consulting. And consulting gave you a very good perspective to quickly learn a new industry, learn about the problems, and then make solutions for them. And I worked across telecommunications, airlines, banking, financial services, several different what we call horizontal industries. My family was, of course, very passionate about life sciences. My wife did her PhD in life sciences. My brother is a PhD. So is my sister-in-law. So there was always this association of what's going on in the health and life sciences industry. 2002, I said I should also become very vertically focused because solving an industry problem was very fulfilling. So in 2002, I started to focus on life sciences to bear that knowledge which you need. So I believe that technology for technology's sake is not as impactful unless you can take that industry problem, solution it, and then solve for it. So that's how I came into the healthcare and life sciences domain.
That's great. So, as you have seen in your family about and the health and sciences related challenges, and that basically intrigued you to get into this particular sector vertical. So, from that perspective, as you said, that you have seen certain challenges which really motivated you to get into the sector and try to make a difference from your perspective. So, what are the key challenges back in the day, maybe in 2000, 2002 era, which really helped you to trigger this particular move?
So, the healthcare and life sciences business is a very regulated business. You have to really understand that if you're taking a pill and giving it to grandmother, you want to make sure it's safe, it's secure, and that it is proven to work. And that's how the whole industry is to make sure that it takes care and protects patient and patient interests. But when you start this industry at that time, digital or digitization was not the fore. There was paper across the board. There were reams and reams of paper, people collecting data in paper, people really engaging with patients in paper, hospitals filling multiple different forms and format. So the industry was really ripe for bringing in technology and technology innovations to bear. And as you could see in 2002, when I started, electronic data capture, which is a very critical part of how the industry starts, was only about 3 to 5% across the board. Today, it's 100%. And so the industry is very fast to follow innovation. And so as innovations got proven in the marketplace around digitization, converting these reams of paper into more connected data and more information, there was a lot of opportunities for technology to play a big part.
That's great. Yeah, I can kind of resonate. Back in the day, at that time, I was studying, and I can see that there were. It's kind of a revolution which was happening through when we are talking about digitization. I also came across work briefly with a company called Iron Mountain. At that time, they, if you are aware, right? They have the archives related to the papers and all. And it always makes me think as well that what a world looks like when we try to digitize everything. And I didn't know at that time that these things are already in place. And still, we are seeing that we are still in a journey. I mean, even if after 2 decades, I can see that still we require a lot of paperwork. And I totally agree with you in terms of those kind of challenges when we get into how do we digitize these information to use forever. And also, we don't have to worry about, I mean, they are not perishable in that perspective, which also uh, get into a question about when we digitize these things, this also brings a lot of vulnerabilities in place in terms of the access control, in terms of the data integrity and theft. What's your perspective on that on a high scale, not generally talking much on the technical part of it? Have you given a thought about like when we try to digitize these information, what are the key components we have to also think in terms of the integrity and the safety of this information?
Yeah. No, that's a great point. The safety of patient and patient information is critical and paramount across the board. There are several regulatory mandates as well as other mandates to make sure that you're protecting this information in a very secure manner. So, if you really look at clinical trials, and most people who come from technology just think that you can put things in the cloud, get data going, and then you're off to the races. No, we're in a very regulated industry. There are regulations all the way from tracking what's called good clinical practices. These are mandates from the FDA, from multiple regulatory authorities around how one should really take care of data. So, for example, your patient data is only visible to the physician. Neither the pharma company, neither anybody else or sponsors will not have access to the data. They will only have it in a de-identified manner. This is very critical to maintaining patient privacy. When somebody introduces technology, as you said, the full data flow has to be proven to the regulatory authorities that there won't be breach. There won't be new information introduced. People who have access are the people who are authorized to have access. And you have to prove it. When an FDA audit comes, you have to show to them that this number of patients, this number of records were visible to only this physician. Nobody else could have access to it. And so the burden to prove this is much more higher. So you're spot on. Data integrity, patient privacy, making sure that it's secure is paramount to what uh, 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 goes around in a clinical and clinical trial infrastructure. And therefore, anybody building technology has to be making sure that they adhere to all of this. It's not just putting a cool tech out there. You got to prove it. You have to validate it, as we call it, so that when somebody comes and asks, prove it to me that nobody could penetrate, you have to show them evidence.
That's so true. And I think that also brings to some of the aspects on the integration across different technologies as well. So, as you mentioned, that it's not only about the digitization, it's also about some kind of a data governance and integrity. And on the top of that, we have to see a total line of responsibilities, how exactly this data has been traveled, or how many fingerprints, if I may say, have, or maybe eyeballs have looked into this data. So in this whole integration journey, I think one of the key aspects in some of the I have seen like in some of the industry is like some organizations really work on working of best of class products across the board for the data integrity. However, they missed out the point of the integration because you have one product working excellent in particular sector, or maybe they have bells and whistles which are required, but they fail to work with the other vendors and products. So considering that part, you've been in executive positions in different organizations, and you have also foresee a lot of digital transformation in that perspective. How exactly you brought those kind of technological operation change when we talk about these integration, because these are not easy, right? You can talk about one product or the other, but when we talk about bringing the whole business together, bringing your getting your true north star, what is your vision about it? So how would that thing play into your vision or strategy at that time?
Yeah. It's a great question. If you really look at life sciences companies, they're like the United Nations of technology. There is technology across different aspects of how the life cycle of life sciences. So why is that? Because each of the stakeholders want to make their sub process work better. They bring in the best in class technology for them and make sure that they are building that platform for their success. And so, like United Nations, you need a universal translator. There is no data integration out of the box. The industry is starting to evolve into what we call suites of packages, but still there are different silos of transactional data which is across the board, which needs to be brought together. So how does one go about doing it? So one really looks at integration, I would say, from four lenses in life sciences. And the first lens is what we call data integration. So that's a lot of effort is going on making sure that the data in one silo is being seen by the other by bringing it into different technology stacks, whether it's data lakes, data warehouses. And that has been a bread and butter of pharma, bringing data and information together. The second type of integration is what we call application integration, where an application can share in real time data with another one so you can make sure that you're not replicating or duplicating effort. So if I created a customer in one system, it flows directly to the other system so that you don't need to be duplicating and doing what we call double data entry. The third part of the integration is experience integration. So you turn it around and make sure that the stakeholders who are really looking at this can then have the experience working in a very seamless manner so that they're looking at the screens and visualizations. And then the last is what we call access integration. In pharma, everybody has 20, 25 different systems they go into. How can you make sure that this integration is seamless from an access standpoint? Now, as you start to build technology together, we call it orchestration. You need to have all of these different siloed technologies be orchestrated together in these four dimensions of data, application, experience, and access.
That's amazing. So I'll just try to reiterate this. So data, application, experience, and access. So that's a great one. I think data and the application is maybe if you're thinking from the operation side, and experience and access from the end user perspective. Is that the
That's
whole thing?
that could be, and and the reason is for the problem statement you said, because there are
Yeah.
different technologies. People are always trying to say unification, but
Hmm.
then there's going to be another cool new application which is going to solve a particular problem. So I always tell in pharma, as you start to unify, you still need to orchestrate.
Yes, that's so well put in that particular perspective you mentioned. And I think that is so important to understand that, as you rightly mentioned, that you have to understand each and every piece together and try to unify them, because one of the challenges what we are seeing here in health and sciences is about the overall experience, as you mentioned. Either the experience is too good, but it's not, we do not have that much of transparency, or the user education is not adequate. So sometimes when we are on the other side of the fence, so which are like from the architect perspective, from building things, we sometimes miss out the point that what would be the end user experience looks like, as you rightly mentioned, that is also so important. And this is a part of the digital transformation. Now, coming from 2002, 2004 era, when you were trying to work and try to digitize the assets, and now coming like today, so you are seeing that the introduction of the artificial intelligence, machine learning is bringing a lot of disruptive technologies and changes out there. At the same time, now we have two camps here, which always, whenever there's some disruptive technologies, the very first thing is about the fear about what it takes from you. And the other thing is having a more optimistic about what we gain in terms of the humankind and our future generations. So when we tussle between these two things, obviously people have their experience and they are decide these two different camps based on their life experiences and what they have seen so far. When people talk about the AI and machine learning, about the positive and negative impacts, and specifically the health and life sciences, the sector which you are expert in. What's your perspective? How do you explain people about the benefit or maybe a probable over leverage of AI and ML, which may also leads to some kind of challenges?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So AI/ML has had a pretty positive impact in drug life cycle. Either using AI/ML to discover new molecules, or to really use AI/ML to streamline clinical trial processes, or using AI/ML to make sure that you're taking care of patient and patient experience correctly. There's a lot of several use cases. Now, the way I explain AI/ML is in twofold. One is for internal operations, and I say, think about AI/ML as a digital worker. So if you are a worker and a digital worker, you need to work together. Don't think about AI as Terminator, replacing what you do. Think about it like Iron Man, like Jarvis, helping you be super productive. So when we drive digitization and especially AI/ML to make operations better, we are always having this narrative of how can this be a power multiplier for you? How can it remove mundane tasks and activities and make you focus on much more higher level? So there, my explanation of AI is artificial intelligence is not AI. It is augmented intelligence. It's augmenting your intelligence to do better. So that's my narrative around how do you use AI, adopt AI to make your work and workload in the operations much better. But the broader theme of AI is very relevant and prevalent in the marketplace. And there are several regulatory aspects which are going on in the AI, including the White House AI blueprint, which they just published. There are several AI legislations from different countries and all. The crux of many of these legislations is how do we have AI to be trusted? So there's a whole framework called trustworthy AI so that you can make sure that these AI models are secure, they protect your data, they are making sure that they are transparent, they're explaining how they came to a conclusion, and they're really being there to prove that they're a value addition and not this black box which tells you, hey, oh, take my answer. So as we start to deploy AI across the board in several life sciences apps, there is this notion that you need to have a trusted AI framework. One of the biggest challenges in AI for life sciences is the data bias. Many of the models are trained on data which is not diverse enough. So, for example, if you came out with that lung cancer example you talked about,
Mhm.
and you trained an AI model to detect certain lung images, and those images are not diverse enough in its population, and it doesn't have Asians and African Americans and Hispanic population the same diversity as Caucasian, then the AI will then make the wrong conclusion. So that's why the trustworthy AI is very important, to really make sure that there is not much bias in the data, or to prove how you trained it, to be transparent, to be secure, to be private, and to make sure that it can be explainable.
That's great. I think that also it's so important that data, AI, and ML also works on how we subscribe to the channels as well. So I would like to reiterate the point that all the listeners from the data and AI models across the different social media, we got to know that around 70% of the people who are really liking our content are not subscribing. So, that being said, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel so that you can get more and more information, and also try to see the AI and ML work in the real as well. So that being said, get back to the discussion. So Shri, you really kind of hit some of the important points about how we can integrate these AI and ML models to cure some of the diseases, which has been really a kind of a challenge from the clinical trials, from the researchers, from the medical world throughout. That being said, there must be some challenges from the clinical trials as well. In even before we talk more from the AI and ML model, I think there is also a fact that not you, rather, I would say that overall health and life sciences, the trial is also one of the challenging aspects. So when we say that, how much time or how many people should be involved in the trial, that also sometimes create a lot of questions. Like, for example, if you talk about the vaccines, right? So historically, we have seen that it may take years to get vaccine onto the ground for the commercial usage. In COVID-19, there was definitely what we say a black swan event where we really have to expedite the vaccine trials and try to make sure that they are safe to use. So, what's your perspective in terms of when we are having these kind of situations, it's a life-threatening situations where we really have to ramp up, and how exactly, from the clinical trial perspective, we know that okay, these many numbers would be enough for us to safely say that, for example, a drug or a vaccine is safe to use to the people across the world?
No, it's a great question, and actually, it's a testimony of how technology and the industry has come together as a whole to solve the vaccine problem. Um, so, in clinical trials, there are three key stakeholders. There's the patient, of course, the
Hmm.
sites or the hospitals, and the sponsors. And these three folks have to come together. Each of them have a different role to play, and each of them are making sure that you bring the right patients to the right doctors with the right medicines to have the right cure. That's what we try to do. A typical clinical trial has multiple phases: phase one, two, three, and phase three is the large trials where you are recruiting thousands of patients to make sure that you're proving that your drug is safe, the right dosage is there for the patient, there's no adverse effects, and you're making sure that it is working across a large set of population. Now, in a vaccine trial, the FDA mandated that if you have to submit any vaccines for approval, you need to have a minimum of 40,000 patients recruited for the vaccine trials. Vaccine trials usually take multiple years. Previous vaccine trials have gone on for 8 to 10 years. When this COVID happened, in less than 6 months, we were able to recruit over 40,000 patients, bring them into the trial, bring them to make sure that they're taking the dosage of the vaccine, and making sure that we're observing them over a 60-day period to ensure there is no drug adverse reaction. And all of this is being done in a super accelerated manner. So I'm only focusing on the clinical trial, but there were some phenomenal scientific breakthroughs which happened to decide on what would be the right vaccine. That's through AIML models and other literature searches. As soon as we knew what the COVID virus was, we knew that there would be 10 possible ways in which to solve for it. And then there was a huge amount of scientific improvement in the mRNA model to how to deliver the vaccine, that people were able to very quickly come out with what should be the vaccine payload and how should we deliver it into the human body. Now comes the big part of the trial. How many people you need to have that diversity population? How do they react to it? How do you get all of this data and collect it and then correlate it and submit it? So previously, a 40,000 patient trial would have taken 2, 3 years just to collect the data, the infrastructure, do the statistical modeling, and then do the submissions. The whole industry came together, and really, as you said, it was a black swan event, but it was also an event where it brought people together, and we were able to do that in less than 6 months. The first patients in many trials started maybe in February, March, and by October, November, you were ready to submit, and you were seeing several vaccine companies submitting data across November, December, January, to launch it. This was a phenomenal uh, rallying off of the forces, including the hospitals and the sites. They're the first line. They're doing great work. Patients coming together and recruiting these type of diversity population. It was not easy, and of course the sponsors and everybody coming together. Now the challenge, as you said, is it's not easy because you have these three stakeholders: patient-centric applications, there are site-centric applications, and there are sponsor-centric applications. Prior to all of this, several of the technology was very sponsor centric. A sponsor would say, this is what I need to collect data, and everybody would use it. As we start to see this whole progression, we're seeing a lot more of a patient centric model. The patient is in the middle, the site and site experience is very important, and then the sponsor then collects that information to make sure that that is happening. So that's a very big pivot and change on approaching that experiential stakeholder, because previously the experiential stakeholder was what is right for the sponsor. Now the experiential stakeholder is what's right for the patient, what's right for the site, and therefore you're flipping that model. What that does is also changes how you do data collection, changes how you do experience management, changes how you do several things around access, integration, data integration, and application integration. But that is the challenge which people are trying to solve more and more, making sure that that experience for the patient is seamless, making sure that the sites and the hospitals are not burdened. A hospital, when they're conducting clinical trials, engage over 25 different systems. They have 30 different passwords for logging into each of these different systems. So there's a lot of work to be done in making that experience of patients and sites much more better.
Absolutely. It's fascinating to know that the things which took years to develop with the help, and this is one of the classic example of AI and ML and creating the models around that how we can quickly gather the data. I think the data discovery and gathering and making some sense out of it would I can only presume that it would have taken so much of time before the actual work on the vaccine or any kind of a drug related research would happen. And this, with the help of these technologies, I think now maybe which would have taken years, now within a month we are getting, or maybe within a days we can get all the data and try to get some information. As you mentioned, that they are at least from the FDA side, 40,000 tests or trials has to be done across the board, which which is really fascinating to me that how we can turn around these things. You also mentioned about like 60 days in that perspective. Now, skeptics may mention that is it enough for any vaccines to be out, or maybe what would be the long-term impacts? What's your perspective about when people come back asking questions about the vaccines, or asking questions about the clinical trials, or also some of the processes which goes through, for example, the placebo effect on that. So what's your perspective, and how would you respond to these kind of questions?
See, a clinical trial process is there to ensure safety of the drug and ensure that it works, or if it doesn't work, there's immediate reaction to observe it. It's in a controlled trial, and you can statistically prove the efficacy and the efficiency of a drug. That's the whole purpose of a clinical trial. Now, you asked three different questions. So, on the vaccines, the whole purpose of the vaccines were to make sure that it reduces the mortality rates around the market. It's not a cure, it's not a prevention, it's to make sure. And as you can see, statistically, people who've taken vaccines have been there to recover faster than people who have not taken. Now, as I said, vaccines take years to get collect real world and real world data. And we're still, there are several what we call long COVID trials going on right now, where we are observing the aspects off of the mechanism of the drugs or the vaccines you've taken, and making sure that you're tracking that. So it's not a one and done and gone. The industry is really looking at this and saying, we had a black swan event. We had to do something to bring things to market. We had to prove that it was safe and efficacy, which we did. But now let's make sure that we can see how it is from a long term perspective. And people are still working out how the boosters, what is the dosage, how often do you have to take, because these are all things which one needs to work out. So from a vaccine standpoint, I would say that where we were very quickly able to design the mechanism of action, and then we were very quickly able to figure out what would be the right way to introduce that into the body. And now we are now making sure that we're looking at the longer term effects of that. So that's how several clinical trials happen. Now, the second question you asked is on placebo. Now, depending on the drug category, for example, in oncology or other drugs, the placebo is a current treatment, and the new clinical trial is the new treatment. So it's not as if you're not getting a treatment. Placebos usually work in other types of lifestyle drug, because you have to statistically prove that your drug works better than those who are not taking the drug. And
Would you
that's
like to expand? Sorry to interrupt. Would you like to expand a placebo effect to the people who may be wondering what exactly it's about?
sure. So as soon as you enroll in a clinical trial, you are randomized. Nobody in the trial knows what type of drug you're getting. The idea is let us say that you're having a drug to make headache go. I'm just making it up. What you would then do is you would split the population into two, those who will get the actual drug and those who would get a placebo, which is just a sugar pill. I'm just making it up, but something which does not affect you, but it does not have any of the medication or the medical content in that pill. Now, nobody knows whether you're getting the real drug or the placebo. And in the clinical trial infrastructure, the people will be then looking in the background around how are you progressing from your particular disease state. So is taking the drug helping you get rid of the headache? There's no adverse reactions, and so on and so forth. And they're really asking you to maintain a diary whenever you visit the doctor, to answer a few questions on how are you feeling as you're taking this drug. Now, at the end of the trial, they would say what's called lock the database. That means you cannot have any more data coming in. And that's when they will unblind and then really look at the data and say who had a better outcome. Did the placebo people have a better outcome, or the people who took the medicine? If people who took the medicine, how much better they were to the people who were in the placebo, so that when you go and submit it to this data to the FDA or any regulatory authority, they can look at it and saying, yes, there is value in this drug, it is effective, and it's better than doing nothing. So that's the reason why you need to have what's called a placebo arm. Now, there are different techniques where people are adopting to get a placebo arm done. So, for example, in the vaccine trials, all of the different industries came together to have what's called a control arm, which will be one control arm against every different vaccine trials you did. And that way, you're not having a placebo per vaccine, but you're making sure that the control group is one, while the people who are taking the vaccines are specific to the sponsors. There are also real world data and real world evidence being used to create some type of a placebo arm. And again, more and more, the industry is looking at saying, how can we give the drugs to the participants while still maintaining the randomization and other needs of a clinical trial?
That's great. I think, and placebo effect is, I think it's relevant across the board in different industries as well. Sometimes when you buy some, maybe shoes, I do a lot of running as well. And sometimes you feel like getting a new shoe will improve your running posture or overall mileage as well. And there are a lot of debatable stuff in terms of that really impacts or not. I think there's a book on placebo as well, that how we can kind of work with the human psyche in terms of making them think that the some things which I would say technically or clinically may not work, or the science may not have any kind of justification, but just because you think that it's working, it makes a positive impact for you. And I think no one will complain if it's always a positive impact. So from that perspective, so that's a great call out from, and thanks for explaining about the placebo effect. We hope you enjoyed our show today. If you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to reach out to us on social media or leave a comment. Don't forget, yes, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. And if you find value in our conversation today, we would be incredibly grateful if you could leave us a rating, reviews, or comments. Again, thank you for tuning in, and we will be back with another episode next week. Till then, keep the conversation going. Let's talk.